Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Just Another Kill Team podcast, connecting kill team communities across the globe. If you're passionate about the tactical skirmish game that brings together strategy, lore, and creativity, you are in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and stay updated with our latest episodes. If you want to support the show, check out our Patreon. Your support means a lot to us. Follow us by using the social media links in the podcast description for all the latest news, and be sure to leave a review to let us know what you think. Thanks for tuning in. Here's today's episode.
All right. Well, we're back with Felipe from the World Championships of Warhammer. He came back with Mandrakes. Last year, what'd you take?
Inquisition.
Quite the change. Did you have high hopes on the switch between Inquisition agents and Mandrakes for this World Championship?
No, I was
Considering how
hoping.
good people think Inquisition agents are right now.
Yeah, I was hoping for a worse performance, but for a better time with the people.
Yeah,
I actually won my golden ticket with Inquisition, but in the last edition.
Yep.
But I have played them so much, I'm really tired of them.
Yeah, I think you were one of the surprises at the World Championships. I know you played a game against Shane that came down basically to the wire, where Shane had a 5-point flip or something off of one kill.
Yeah, last activation for turning point. I was sure I was going to win, and then he moved that, killed my model, and I believe 5 or 4 points swing.
I think
and
when
I
he
lost by
talked
one.
about it afterwards, it was a confirmed kill along with kill op switch, and then there was his primary op was, I think, the tac op probably. So he flipped kill op for 2 points basically, and then also got confirmed kill, and then that confirmed kill also got him 1 more point on the kill op because it went from 4 to 5, so it ended up being like 5-point swing, and he collapsed the game, and he won by 1 point. So it was actually a really, really crazy like final tactics moment where Shane didn't know if he had any outs, I think, and then he found the out, and then he flipped the game.
Yeah, he found the outs. I was really sure he hasn't, but well, that's good.
What was your overall record at Worlds? I know that you did pretty well, all things considered, because I don't think a lot of people had a lot of high hopes for Mandrakes coming in. I think the stats over the last couple of weeks have shown that Mandrakes actually are pretty good. Like, most of the elf teams are reasonably well situated to fight with the elites, and Mandrakes specifically has some fun tools. So I'm just curious how you did overall.
Yeah, I got 5 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw.
Overall, pretty good.
A little bit better than last year. Last year I got 4-4. So a little improvement.
Yeah, very respectable. So I'm curious, what are some of the toughest matchups for Mandrakes?
I think right now the toughest is Legionaries.
Even though you have the ability to like run around, surveil them, and sit in the back line, you still feel like they're one of the harder teams.
You have to play them like that. No shooting, no charging, just taking 1-2 kills, taking the primary, and taking pictures. We say pictures here, taking surveillance.
Yeah, Mandrakes are perfectly situated for flipping into your opponent's backline, especially against only six Marines on the other side. So they have to play a little division. They come back out, giving you some shadow zone in the background where you can switch over and basically surveil safely after they're fully out of range, right?
Yeah. Normally, if you lose initiative, maybe you lose one model, but you got more.
Yeah, definitely a thing that I don't think a lot of people would fully conceptualize. A lot of people knew about the Commando Grot being able to do it, but Mandrakes is like a team. I think coming into Worlds, I hadn't really seen a lot of chatter about it. But you did a great job with it. Do you have Legionary are hard? Does that mean that Warp Coven are easier?
Maybe 1% easier. I thought I got an easier matchup against Warp Coven. But mainly here, all people play it full Marines or maybe 2 Sangors. So when they save on twos, making them safe on eventually 4 or with a stun grenade on 5s. I think that's okay. The change from 3 to 4 is good, but from 2 to 4 is a lot better.
Oh, that's actually some fun tech. So you're using stun grenades to get some extra soul striking done?
Yeah, I do it a lot. Normally, when it's War Coven or Legionaries, first turn point, they advance. And I knew it's a bad matchup for me. I have to take risks. So normally, I just TP to the bottom, to the back line in turning point 1. Hoping there is 2 guys next to each other. I stun them and hoping for initiative. So then I shoot and go away in turning point 2. And actually, it worked for me 3 times, I think, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it works. It sounds like it should work against most of the Legionary because people are expecting you to like take a little bit of time. But if you have an aggressive play on turn 1, Jason on Phobos got a lot of use out of his extra stun grenades, right, Jason?
Yeah, and it's also, funnily enough, using smoke grenades for aggressive positioning. I'm sure Mandrakes probably have an angle to do that as well, where essentially, like, I'll stage, like, just outside of where someone can move and shoot and get within 2. Does the Mandrakes stun grenade, or the smoke grenade from the permanent one, does that one ignore piercing as well, or is it just obscuring?
Yeah, it's all the same.
It says it's the same as
doesn't go away.
It's insane.
Yeah,
it's super good.
Did you have any cool tech around that perma smoke grenade?
Normally on Volcus, if they got no obscure, I put my gunner, the Abyssal, on top with the smoke grenade, so I can free dash out, shoot, and then go back into the smoke. I do that a lot. Surprise people quite a lot.
Sounds kind of like a similar trick to what Warp Coven was using at the World Championships, where you're able to move out 9 inches, get an aggressive action, then teleport to safety.
Not that good, but
not that good. But I'm just trying to come up with
like that.
I want to make sure that the players who listen to the podcast who are interested in Mandrakes kind of hear a little inkling of all the different tools, because it does feel like Mandrakes are a very, very high tech piece choice. Like Void Dancers obviously are very powerful because there's a lot of raw power. 5 attacks on 3s, 4/5. Severe with the ability to just hit for 9 damage and leave. But Mandrakes, you've got the weird shooting, which drops people down to a 1/2 save or a 1/3 save. And against some of the Angels of Death, a 1/2 plus a 5-up save, which is very awkward.
Really?
Luckily, not a lot of Angels of Death at World Championships. But we talked a little bit.
I got one matchup against the only guy with Space Marines.
Yeah. But the Shade Weaver's got his permanent smoke grenade, which is now both better and worse from last edition because ignoring piercing is a big buff. So not that it matters for you because Mandrakes already have invulns.
No, but it's definitely a nerf. In last edition, when people can't shoot you if you are in the smoke, it was pretty more powerful than now. You can put your leader inside the smoke in last edition, and they have to charge you. And you got deployed to fight first. So,
the Mandrakes, I think, across the board between this edition and last edition, ate a couple small nerfs here or there. The leader got less consistent. Your smoke is no longer can't be shot. I think your Dirge Maw is a little bit less good at being able to pick targets when he goes before someone. But overall, now that you have 7 inches of movement, you have a lot more room to play around the board.
The movement is good, especially in Into the Dark now. You have to cross the doors, and all people is moving 5 crossing. Now you got 6. It feels a lot better.
Yeah, there's a lot more places where you get the movement advantage and it actually matters compared to last edition where, everyone was moving 6 and you were moving at the same distance, but you could teleport. Now you can teleport and you move further than most people, which ends up feeling pretty nice. Did you have any other big tricks did you know most of these tricks going into World Championships, or which things did you discover at Worlds and which things did you discover before Worlds?
Mostly I knew them all. I love Mandrakes, so I play them a lot in the last edition, and now in the new edition, I play most of my game with Mandrakes, but we have not Volcus here, So I got Volcus painted and armed, I don't know, 3 weeks before Worlds, maybe.
Oh, man.
So I play mostly Into the Dark, but in Volcus I got, I think, 4 or 5 games. And I didn't know I can teleport in the top vantage. It's all heavy, and I can put 2 guys in there, and I learned that in Worlds.
Oh, right. Because Within Shadow says you need to have heavy within 1 inch of you. And because
Yeah.
all of the Volca strongholds are fully heavy all the way up and down, that means you can teleport all the way to the top. So you are the only team that is basically guaranteed access to that. And because you're the only team that's super guaranteed access, you can choose if you want 1 or 2 guys there. And then you also have the flip side of you can also leave from there, which not a lot of teams have access to. Because a lot of teams, once you go up to the 2nd floor, you are kind of locked because it's a 6-inch drop.
Yeah. And also the Super Conceal that works with the Vantage, so you can stay there super safe.
As far as the equipment goes, did you we have the chain snare, which is makes fallback harder. We got Shadow Glyph, which is a super conceal once a turn. Soul Gem, which is blast 1, which is also lethal 5 on In the Dark and on strongholds, and then Bone Darts, which are the weird silent profile. Did you find yourself using 2 of these, 3 of these all the time compared to? It sounds like you took stun grenades.
Yeah, stun grenades for me are a must.
2,
and then I use Super Conceal almost, I think, always, and Soul Gem also always. Chain Snare, maybe if I got a Horde, a Chuti Horde, but
like Inquisition.
But the meta is not there right now, so.
And then Bone Darts never?
No, never. I don't like them.
Valid.
I prefer shooting with Soul Strike.
That's right, because they don't have Soul Strike. They are physical.
Yeah, they don't have them. And in the Meta Elite, they're going to save them all, probably.
So that sounds like you have 1 flex slot. Which you generally took as would you take?
Then depends on the map, the team, but most of the time I also take the scouting option for equipment. So I got normally 5 slots, and the 2 other slots Into the Dark, light barricades, maybe the thing that costs you, that one.
Because you ignore them and your opponent has to manage.
Yeah.
You just lay them all across the board and get in people's way.
Frag grenades sometimes, crack grenades also. Mostly to scare people, then shooting them, but I took them.
Most of it, like you said before, you generally want to use Soul Strikes because the Soul Strike is generally kind of performing a role similar to Piercing 1. And also hitting on 4s is not quite as good as hitting on 3s with your native shooting. Yeah. Did you ever get into big shootouts against the Marines? Because obviously this is a thing that people know about the Mandrakes is that you're generally saving worse. So you can, if you get into a shootout and they're saving on 4s with the ability to ignore invulns and they're shooting you and you're saving on 5s and 4s, generally getting into shootouts against the Mandrakes is not a great choice. But did you find yourself doing that at all in Worlds?
Like a shooting battle, you said? No. I play really cagey, like if I'm a ninja. I'm most of the time trying to make 1 shot and that they don't shoot me back, or only giving them 1 charge. Not like super heavy shooting or fighting, like break really cagey, make your primaries, try to take points from wherever you can. But elves in general are super fragile, so I cannot afford to shoot, and all my models are dead.
Yeah, that's interesting because now that kind of brings me on to where is your CP budget going into? Because obviously, I think in last edition, at the height of Mandrake power, people had a lot of talk about glomming Shroud, which is getting your free retain if you're within shadow, and then just like getting into shootouts against teams, because your shooting is, while it's not amazing, 3-4 damage against 5s means that if 3 Mandrakes shoot one target, you'll probably kill the target over time.
Yeah.
And if you have glomming Shroud, you're generally not taking all that much damage. But it sounds like in this edition, you haven't gone with that strategy at all, when I know some people did want to do that. So where's your power budget going into for CP? Are you generally hitting the creeping horde to give yourself the extra dash in between activations?
Yeah, the extra dash is a must. I think at least turning point 2 and 3, it's a must. With that, you can get far away so they cannot charge you or move dash shoot you, but then you can free dash and make a shot if you want, or charge you. But then the reroll is also a must. When you are in shadow, you got one reroll. That's a must. And then I save mostly for when they charge me. I got to fight first. In Volcus to cross terrain. And the heal sometimes, but it's more of a niche. And the other one is change order. That also is a good trick sometimes.
Okay, so a little bit. It sounds like you're using almost everything. Just depends on the situation.
Yeah,
and
yeah. I think that's the power of Mandrakes. They need a lot of CP, but their ploys is what makes Mandrakes. You got a lot of, if you want to shoot, if you want to charge, a lot of shenanigans, and that's what makes Mandrakes play.
Yeah, because Shadow's Bite is one of those great ploys where if your opponent charges you, you get to go first, which is kind of like having Just a Scratch in melee.
Yeah. Versus Marines, I do a lot. I bait a charge from a guy that's kind of alone, or maybe that. So he charge, I fight. First, I normally put 10 damage on the Marine. He kills me, but then I charge with another guy and kill him. So 1-for-1 with a Marine is always nice.
Especially if you hit them with the big blade and steal their soul afterwards.
Yeah, that's true.
So one of the big things that I ran into while looking at Mandrake players last edition was that the Chooser of Flesh was overly important to making a game plan work. It sounds like from the way you played, you were less reliant on getting that third APL to pop so that you could actually just score points. Because Mandrake Chooser of Flesh, for any of the listeners who don't know, is the big 2-sword melee operative, 4 dice on 3s, 5-6 brutal, lethal 5. If he gets a kill, you take a soul harvest, a little piece of your opponent's soul, and then whenever anyone else activates, you can either get a third APL or you can heal, which means that almost everyone always takes the APL. And if you happen to kill something with 3 APL, so someone who gets comms buffed or a Marine, you get 2 of these tokens.
Yeah.
So this was a thing that was very important for Mandrakes working in the last edition, but I guess the context of the edition has changed because now your threats are all six Marines, melee monsters. So you're no longer relying on the Chooser of Flesh to try to sculpt out a game plan, it sounds like, right?
Yeah. It's a good model, and if I can get the plus APL, I'm always going to take it, especially against Marine. But in Worlds, all people is good. So they don't give you normally the
There's a wide berth, huh?
Yeah. So I use it like a bait to stall people from one room, for example, or things like that. But my game plan is based. I'm 9 models, 2 APL. I need to win with that. If I got 3 APL, nice, better for me. But I need to win with 2 APL, 9 models.
Yeah, I do think that is a helpful outlook, because if you put like too many eggs in one basket with like really counting on any single model, it makes it really hard to climb out of a hole, especially because generally there is no model, like even the Chooser of Flesh can't like carry the whole team.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. You can put all your eggs in one basket. They kill it and you are screwed.
Yeah, I think the ability of the new surveillance means that like there's a whole new access to a game plan for the Mandrakes where you're no longer reliant on having to get a kill so that you can pivot out to being able to fight people and shoot and then run away. Now you have the ability to play a passive game plan and force your opponent to interact with you at the edges of the board where the chooser of flesh can maybe get a kill every once in a while. Obviously, this probably works a little bit better against wider teams where there are more threats floating around compared to something like the current elites where there's 6 of them, they're super hard to kill. The chooser of flesh is not guaranteed to get a kill when he goes in because he only got 4 attacks.
Yeah, you need to make a plan around that and choose wisely. That's the hard part, I think, of Mandrakes. When to charge, when to shoot, when to just stay around near the edge of charging range. Normally when you play like that, not all, but a lot of opponents kind of despair, like get anxious, like nothing is going to happen, nothing is happening. I'm not killing anybody. This guy just jumping around, taking pictures. So it's a lot of mental stress, I think, also.
It also ruins some of the normal scoring cadence that people get used to, right? People are tracking kill up and you've gotten 1 kill. It's the middle of turn 3. Whereas generally by the middle of turn 3, there's 2 or 3 kills per side because people want to go in, get those points and score. But your goal is to just play footsies around the edges because you can lose a little bit on primary op if you can stall their crit op and their kill op because you have 9 points with the infiltration bucket in the bag. So you just need a little bit around the edges. And then on turn 4, hopefully you've put enough pressure on your opponent where you can launch a missile and crack the line somewhere, basically, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you find yourself having an operative that you would generally rely on as your missile piece that would go in to go hit your opponent and break their lines? I would assume that the leader model, the Night Fiend, would be a good choice because it's got the Ublex, which can shrug damage and has 9 wounds.
Yeah, if I need to break a line or I need really to enter a room, normally my leader is the piece of choice. I think, if I must go in, it's the leader. If I need to shoot, obviously the gunner, how it's called, the abyssal.
The abyssal.
Yeah, but my plan normally is hoping I don't need to go in that hard. But against some teams, like I mentioned earlier, I know I'm in a bad spot from the start of turning point 1 against Legionaries, against Inquisition, against War Coven. Sometimes I need to risk it. I go in.
So of the Astartes tier monsters floating around, Warp Coven and Legionary probably present unique challenges compared to some of the rest of the meta because they are a little bit more powerful than the other Marines, it seems like. Yeah. Do you have game? Do you feel like you have good game plans against the other Marine teams? Like Nemesis Claw have been a little bit on the resurgence recently, and then Angels of Death are obviously have the little cheat on Hardy where, for anyone who doesn't realize, like the way the defensive rule on Angels of Death is worded, you get a 5-up save and a 1-2 save against Mandrakes, basically shutting down
1, 2, 3 and 5s.
Yeah, and 5s, which is crazy.
Whoa, I had never imagined that. Wait, so hold on. The 5 and the 6.
I'll get the wording out just because it's probably.
The 6 is always a fail with the Soul Strike, so it's only the 5s.
Okay, so the 5.
It's a great save.
Yes. So Hardy from the Angels of Death says, whenever an opponent is shooting this operative, defense dice results of 5 are critical successes. So against Mandrakes, who are soul striking you, you actually have 1s and 5s as crit success, and then 2s and 3s as normal successes, which is very funny.
Yeah. Also with the Death Guard warrior, the same.
Oh yeah, just the warrior has that same exact thing.
Yeah.
That's very silly.
Yeah.
By letter of the law, that is how it was worded, so that's how it works.
Yeah. I'm hoping they change it so they can crit save 1 and 2s, but we'll see.
Yeah, that might be a little harder for them to program in.
Yeah, yeah.
At any rate, yeah, like it seems like you have pretty solid game plans against everyone. Maybe they're a little riskier against Legionary and Warp Coven. Yeah. Do you feel like the Surveil plan has worked very well for you against like Nemesis Claw, Phobos, Angel of Death, Plague Marines? I guess it would make more sense against something like Death Guard because they really just can't catch up to you, and you can just run away from them.
Yeah. No, I think it's a better approach. They don't have all the tools that Legionaries or Warp Coven has. So I think it's better. I think Mandrakes are in a really good spot. Nerfing these three teams, I think they are going to be a really good team.
And then I guess my next question, my follow-up to that is, how do you feel like the Mandrakes will work against the other elf teams? Because I feel like looking at the stats from week to week with me and Jason that we do on Patreon on Mondays, we've been seeing that elves have been kind of on a resurgence because they seem reasonably well positioned to fight against the other Marines. So how do you feel like the matchup is against like Void Dancers, Corsairs, Blades of Cain? And do you feel like you have tools for those matchups, or do you have to play differently against them?
I'm really not played a lot against other elves, but I think Mandrakes mostly have a good matchup.
Yeah, like being able to
this
fight
is the
first.
only matchup when you can trade one for one and you are kind of okay. Normally, you can't do that. And I think the other elves maybe are better against Marines, elites, but against other elves, kind of struggle. And Mandrakes, I think, are very consistent. So maybe I'm in love too much with Mandrakes, but I think they got a good play against other elves.
Yeah, like some of the really strong seeming tech for Mandrakes versus other elves. I mean, like if other elves' strength is their mobility, you are outclassing them by just teleporting around. And then if other elves' strengths are like power sword duels, you can just like you can bully people by hitting first and killing people pretty reliably, and then if they attack you, you can use the Shadow's Bite to just like win that duel anyways. So as long as you keep on being cagey, like leaning into that mobility strength and having like one perfect counter ambush per turn, I think they're in a amazingly good spot against pretty much all the other elves.
Yeah, I think that too. Deploy the fight first is super good against elves.
Super good, yeah.
And I would expect that Soul Feast, the heal, is actually probably more important against elves, because if you go into a fight or your opponent fights you on the off chance you win the fight randomly, being able to go from 2 wounds back up to 6 wounds is going to be like, oh, I have a fully ready model to go, and you can just fly out and go do something else.
Yeah, that play against low wound models, when you normally maybe win and you got 1 HP, 2 HP, you can heal up. Nice.
Yeah, like the Shadows Bite bait in a piece of cover against another elf team. They come in, you Shadows Bite them. They're like, okay, well, that sucked. But then you heal up with Soul's Feast, and then you charge out the next turn. That could be quite brutal.
Yeah. But I love my models that live in 1 or 2 HP. I normally use them for the taking pictures, taking surveillance. Most of people think, like, for example, in Volcus, you teleport your wizard, how it's called, the Shade Weaver, I think.
Oh, Shade Weaver, the portal guy. Yeah, you portal up
the
to
portal
the top
guy.
so anyone can
You teleport it on the top, and all he will do all the game is just taking pictures and throwing smoke. But when you got a model with 1, 2 HP, he's not going to do much in the game. I'm normally flip like the position. So now the surveillance guy is that guy. So if he leaves, then now the next turn, he's the guy who is going to teleport back and take the picture, or move and take the picture. So now I got a full model in the top of Volcus who can do another things. Charge down or maybe shoot something else.
Yeah, because one of the cool things that the Mandrakes can do off of that top platform is they can phase through terrain and then just ignore it. So you basically start measuring a direct line. You measure 4 inches down, and then you just pass through the wall. So you have effectively a 4-inch threat bubble from the top of Volcus terrain, which is kind of crazy. Did you catch anyone out with that at Worlds?
Yeah, I don't remember the match, but I remember charging from the top down into the stronghold. Also putting my leader, if a stronghold corner is near the middle, I just put my leader in, so the 6-inch bubble to delay the activation. He's covering a lot of the middle ground, and I can always pay 1 CP and charge through all the terrain.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if Jason, you would probably want me to send you the Mandrakes that I have so you can give them a try, because this sounds very much like the Phobos gameplay, just with 9 models.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I like the elf teams are a lot of fun, and I've kind of been dabbling around with the Blades of Cain, doing all banshees, looking for like a high tempo way to play, which is kind of there, just not on Into the Dark, but banshees work well on Volcus. But I mean, Mandrakes do seem really fun and interesting. They've got a lot of cool
really
ingredients.
fun.
So you said that you've been playing Mandrakes for a long time. You also were on Inquisition. Inquisition are pretty strong right now. Did you have any thoughts from watching other people play them at Worlds where there's a little bit of like, oh man, I wish I'd played Inquisition agents? Or were you very happy that you were on Mandrakes and you got to play like maybe not as spicy game?
Yeah, in a moment I thought, oh, man, I'm regretting not bringing Inquisition. But I think I got a pretty good run, and I think the surprise factor also helped me a lot in the worlds, because all the people I were studying Inquisition, Legionaries, Warp Coven, and not a lot of people play Mandrakes, I think. So it's always like a surprise factor.
Yeah, were there other players at all that brought Mandrakes?
There's one other player.
Yeah.
Did you end up getting best in faction between the two of you?
No. Last day,
I didn't actually look at the end scores for who did best on Mandrakes.
Yeah, on Sunday I lost my 2 games. I was a little hangover, so it wasn't a great day for me.
Did you actually, in those 2 losses, do you remember the big points that you could have changed that maybe could have won you the games? Like, talk us a little bit through your low point matchups now that you have a little bit of distance.
Yeah. For example, my first game on Sunday, I was against Warp Coven. It was a super long game, like 4+ hours, and I was super tired, super hangover. I wasn't thinking too right, and I eat a blast from the wizard with the blast with rending and all, with 3 models, and then I lost the game.
Oh, you're just dead on instantly. Yeah. So just obviously, space out.
I lost by 1 point. I was doing good, but that play,
end of the game.
I gave them the chance. Yeah.
Was that blast
still only a 1 point loss? That's pretty impressive.
Was that blast like early in the game, or was it late?
And I think starting turning point 3, maybe, or ending turning point 2.
Yeah.
But for example, that's an example of how Mandrakes can, if they lost a lot of models, you can always max surveillance, take 9 points, a couple of primaries, and you can still fight back.
Pretty impressive. So even taking 3 blasts somewhere at the beginning of 3, you were still able to keep it to within a point.
Yeah. If I see that blast, I'm probably won that game. Yeah.
And then the second game, hopefully not a brain fart as blasty as that one.
That was a tough one versus Inquisition from Liam, I think, from Australia.
Okay.
And was a close game also, but yeah, I rolled really, really bad that game. But I can't complain, because all the 9 other matches I rolled, I think, about average. So 1 bad game with dice, it's okay.
Yeah, look, as long as when you look back at your mistakes, you know when it is an actual mistake, like, oh, I got blasted. I really shouldn't stand within 2 inches of my guys. But if you're a little hungover and it's the end of the tournament, and, it's like, it's okay. And then the other one is like, well, I rolled pretty poorly. Because obviously the strategy has been working, staying cagey, staying at the outer edges of the boards, taking pictures and not committing unless your opponent forces you to commit, or you get a nice little chooser of the flesh moment where you can go get a 3rd APL. Seems like a pretty good overall strategy for the Mandrakes. And it's something also unique to the Mandrakes right now. Not a lot of teams can play infiltration at the same level as what the Mandrakes are doing.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing about that, if you are consistent or a good player, you can kind of read the board, so you can do this plan. You don't depend on the dice. So that's always the same. If you are consistent, you don't depend on the dice, so you can make a pretty good game mostly of the time.
Yeah, and the Mandrakes, Kurt, it sounds like your strategy of, you're really not committing to the dice at all because you're trying to infiltrate, you're trying to surveil. Yeah. Do you have any other TAC op strategies that you bumped into that you did at World Championships, or was it surveillance every time for 10 rounds?
My original plan was to jump between surveillance and the recon one when you kill the...
Confirm kill.
Yeah, confirm kill. But the more I play surveillance, the more I fell in love.
It's really good, yeah.
It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, I think it's it's clearly one of the better TAC ops. It just does not play alongside the core game plan of having kill op as a scoring track. So you do need to have a plan to keep the game low scoring. So I think the idea of the Mandrakes just sitting at the edge and not fighting, it makes sense because you can keep the kill op low.
We are in shadows.
Yeah, you're within shadows, and then suddenly the Night Fiend shows up through a wall, phasing into and out of existence, and just chopping someone in half, and then sitting in the open, just waiting, daring people to hit him on his four up invuln.
Yeah.
I guess Volcus is also a nice natural hunting ground for you because all of the terrain is basically heavy across the board, right?
Yeah, Volcus is super great from Mandrakes. I haven't played a lot, but it's super good. It's super, super, super good.
You didn't have any big tricks you learned at Worlds on the terrain like Volcus. I mean, we talked about how you could be on the top of the second floor and you could phase through the terrain, so you have about a 4-inch threat bubble, which is already pretty good. You also talked about how you switch 1 health models up and down from the top of the building so that you can take pictures with your weakened models and then send your full health Shade Weaver off into the distance. But did you have any other terrain tricks that you saw that you weren't really expecting, like a particularly good spot for a smoke, or areas where your opponents tended to cluster up so you could hit those stuns?
Sorry. Normally the smokes is super dependent of the other team, but you can't go wrong with putting it on the abyssal guy. But if you have to move forward, for example, you can put the smoke there to protect your guys. It's super flexible, really, and you have to study your opponent to get the better performance of the smoke. But I don't think there are a lot of tricks. I think just crossing terrain, throwing smokes on vantage, using the super conceal.
Yeah, because you can you can kind of rig situations, because on some of the Volcus maps, people tend to cluster up on their first initial deployment. So being able to set up parts for stun to try to set something up, or when people are staging up for turn 2, you have the obvious stun spots floating around. And if people forget about the 1-inch blast on stun, so be it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's super good with the 1-inch soul strike. So you stun, shoot, super, super, super good.
Whoa, so there's actually times when you can set up basically at the end of turn 1, you've teleported into position, you hit the stun, and you're hoping basically to get the blast one immediately after. Which is
if
pretty
you
cool.
want initiative, that's the only time when I do that play. It's the only time when I hoping to get the initiative turning point 2 or 3. And turning point 3 you can also TP and stun and hoping for the initiative the next turn.
Did you ever do the juice where you send the Abyssal to be the shooter and then you ramp him up the turn before so that he can do the shot, basically? Or send someone else who is juiced up by the Abyssal? But the Abyssal is the only model on the team that has 5 attacks for shooting. So did you use the Abyssal, or did you use a warrior that the Abyssal would buff? Did you map out the tree there?
Yeah. I use both. Depends on how clumpy the opponent are. If they only got models within 1 inch, I'm not going to risk the abyssal. But if I because the abyssal is 2 inches blast. So, but if they gave me a nice 2 inches blast, I TP the abyssal and risk it. Normally, the last activations are always a warrior, the Dirchmo, and the abyssal. And then you can play with that. What is your last activation or not?
These are basically like your 3 best shooter options. Like a warrior buffed up by the abyssal does an okay job because he goes from 3-4 damage to 4-5 damage with the balefire. The Dirgemaw can do the same stun shoot because he has the 5 attacks on 3s. 5 attacks on 2s, actually. He's one of the few models that hits on 2s for the horrifying scream. And because was it stun does -1 APL at the retained dice step, you actually force your opponent to be saving on 1s or 2s.
Right.
Which is pretty spooky. So 5 attacks on 2s, 2-2, effectively 2-4 because it's got Devastating 2 with Soul Strike and Stun and Seek Light. So basically you're saving your best shooters for your last 3 activations. Kind of, echoing what used to be the Horde strategy of Kill Team 21.
Yeah, it's the normal thing to do. You set up your 3 last guys to be the menace in the next turning point. If they don't give me a blast, so I can teleport and stun, normally with the abyssal is my second to last activation. So he buff some guy, and then last activation with the Direchmo, I get in range so I can interrupt. If he activates first, and then I shoot him and go away.
Oh man, that feels like particularly brutal because the Dirgemaw can also get the buff for the balefire,
it's
right?
like 3-5. 5 on 2s.
3-5 on 2s is kind of wild, especially against 1s and 2s.
And if he stuns, they save with 1 less.
Yeah, it is a very, very powerful set of synergies. And then, obviously we've got your 4 Force Warrior choices on Mandrakes.
Yeah, 4. Yeah, 5 specialists for warriors.
Unluckily for us, those warriors are pretty boring. They kept the same rules coming into this edition. A lot of the other warriors in Kill Team 21 that got transferred over all got like fun new toys, and warriors got they already had the extra damage on their power swords, and I guess power swords are a marked increase over not power swords.
Yeah, it's nice to have, but they are not the best warriors comparing to other teams' buffs.
Yeah, because they got no buff. All they got is 1 inch of movement, which I suppose is not nothing. 1 inch of movement is pretty good. It's just not really what we wanted. Okay, so we talked a lot about Mandrakes here. Did you have another team that you are kind of looking at playing? Rekka, the Rekka crew rules will be out by the time this podcast comes. Are you looking at the Ratlings or the Rekkas? Because the Ratlings have baked in creeping horde because they all move every other activation. So have you been looking at the Ratlings as maybe a team to pick up just because they have one of these core Mandrake rules?
I'm going to pick them up now. Normally, I make like a year of Kill Team. So afterwards, the next 6 months, I play like super for fun. I don't mind if the team is D tier. I don't mind. I just play for fun. And then the second 6 months, I play like more seriously, planning on worlds.
All right. So Ratlings are maybe in a position because you've got Scarper, which is rhymes with Creeping Horde. It's not quite the same, but the rules look pretty similar, and they do have infiltration, which maybe is the thing that you want to do.
Not as easy, but you got them.
There's like the Raider can zip around and also gather surveillance pretty well, although that's not nearly as good as anyone on the team can do it pretty reliably, but still is pretty good.
Yeah, I was hoping him in Volcus to teleport to the top and do the same, but it's not as easy as with Mandrakes, but it looks like a fun team.
Yeah, there's quite a few options on that team. So unfortunately, one of the more expensive teams to build because you got to get at least 1 box of Ogren, if not 2, or you get really good with magnets. All things.
I already bought 2 boxes, and I'm waiting for my the hobbits.
Yeah, I mean the models are great. Jason has them, so he's been noodling around. I don't know if he's gotten a game with them yet, but he has mentioned that the rattlings are very short.
They are very, very short, yeah. I've played against my, like, just NPOs, but, like, there's some kind of, like, crazy combos where you can stack out of activation dashes. For example, the dog has the early warning, the mutt, where if someone moves within 2, and that friendly hobbit is within 6 inches of the battle mutt and an enemy moves within 2, to clarify that, you use the early warning to do a dash to get out of their threat range. And then if you're out of line of sight, or like you're safe and you're in cover or whatever after that, you could also Scarper at the end of their activation. And now all of a sudden it was just like a full-blown, you're hanging out, like, minding your own business, and then you just move 6 as a counter to an enemy approaching, and then on your activation you could even, like, reposition or, like, dash again and shoot. But, like, a lot of the weapons on the team are full-blown heavy, so you might get the most mileage out of that with, like, the Grenadier, where if you dash twice and then you reposition and throw your giant grenade, all of a sudden that was just like a 12-inch movement in a grenade, and there's just some crazy, crazy stuff like that. The rattlings look pretty spicy.
Definitely going to need to roll more dice than Mandrakes, so it sounds like.
Yeah, a lot more.
But, there's other ways to interact with, dice rolling. So, you talked about how Mandrakes, you're trying to avoid using your dice at all. But there's also weight and numbers, which lets you average out dice over time, right? So you can see, you were depending on maybe 1 or 2 sets of dice rolls at the beginning of turn 2, turn 3, or you get a blast off to kind of swing some momentum. But you could also go the other way of, like, I'm playing a shooting team. I'm just going to shoot every single gun for the whole game, and we'll see what happens.
I kind of actually imagine that would be something that I might actually do if I was noodling around with Mandrakes, and it would just kind of be jump all over the place and shoot at people from unexpected angles, and if you shoot, if it's like all long range shots, then they have to shoot you back with your double retain.
Yeah.
And then, like, saturate and soul strike.
You can play a shooty team. You just deploy to retain. It's good.
Yeah, it's like you bait people with Shadow's Bite, and then just, like, skirt around the edges and shoot across the map.
It's definitely a thing that I think Mandrakes got a lot more use out of in last edition, when the context of the edition was a lot more horde teams. We had commandos who are, a shooty, wider team than you that you had to chip down before you go in, because you're not going to kill them generally when you go in. You had Brood Brothers, which were, like, on the upswing at the end of last edition, that always had, one power piece and just a bunch of dudes all the way across who could shoot you. Not great, but you did have to interact with them in shooting a lot. And then you had Scouts, which was basically also just a bunch of meathead checks, where every scout could kill you, and we're generally going to kill a scout, but not always. As far as the Chilean kill team scene, one of our favorite things on here is to talk a little bit about your local scene. Tell us a little bit about your local club, your local player base, how many people you guys got going on, how many tournaments you guys got, because everyone here who's listening from all the way around the world, because now we know it's the end of the year. We've gotten some of our podcast stats. We've got 85 some odd countries listening, 55 generally. So we're a little bit, we got like a global listener base. So tell us a little bit about Chile. What goes on? Do you guys have the siestas that Spain has for, tournaments where in the middle of the tournament you take a 2-hour lunch break? Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
No, Kill Team is growing. Compared to last year to this year, it has grown a lot. But I don't know if you know how Chile is, but it's a really long piece of land. I don't know in miles, maybe 6,000 miles long, but super thin.
It's a thin country that runs all the way up along basically like the coastline of South America, right?
So it's hard to move from city to city. And the majority of Kill Team players are in the capital, it's in the middle, Santiago de Chile. I live like 1,000 miles away, I think.
Damn.
Something like that. So I play mostly with friends in houses, maybe in a store, but normally with friends. So the community here is like 6-8 people. It's a small town. We only play tournaments when we travel to Santiago, and normally when the tournament gives a golden ticket.
So when the golden ticket events do happen, how far out are people from Chile coming to Santiago? Is it like, all the separate player bases like, okay, it's time to go to the tournament. We all show up in Santiago.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, it's like this is the event, and all the people came to Santiago to play the event. But I think, in Santiago are most players, but they are kind of new. I don't know if in war games in general or in competitions. But for example, when they make tournaments, like normal tournaments without like a prize, like a golden ticket, they got, I don't know, 30, 40 people, maybe more. But when they give the golden ticket, 12 people, 16 people, like it's like a fear, I think, to the real hard try competition. So that's the thing I hope this year change.
Basically, you're hoping that there's a little bit more density kind of elsewhere in Chile. How far is the travel? I mean, it sounds like Chile. If you're traveling, up to 1,000 miles, basically, it seems like a crazy distance. As an American, for me, I'm like flying back and forth across the country. That's probably about as far. So Chile, that seems like a crazy distance. So it's hard to collect all the disparate scenes and also to grow your own scene. It sounds like you guys are playing locally in your house, but I guess Santiago probably has a shop or a couple shops.
Yeah. Santiago has, I think, 2 or 3 shops. People go to play, like, I think most of the days of the week. Like today, we're going to X shop. Who's going? Then next day, we're going to the other shop. Who's going? They play a lot. So I think they only need to change like the chip from. We also need to play tournaments. In tournaments, we can improve a lot. It's a learning experience. You don't need to go like, oh, I'm going to lose all games. I don't want to be last guy. You are going to learn from that, and next tournament maybe you win the golden ticket. So I think that. It's
like the competitive climb, the hunger to learn instead of win, because every game you could learn something new.
Yeah, that's true.
And honestly, one of the big things I tell people, so if anyone in Chile ends up listening to this podcast, my advice is always that when you go to tournaments, those extra games that you play one after the other, those help you solidify competitive concepts. And if you play against someone a little better than you and everyone is nice, hopefully everyone is, the goal is you could talk to your opponent and be like, did I make any obvious mistakes? Because sometimes you see your own mistakes and sometimes your opponents see obvious mistakes. And one of the ways I like to frame those questions is, what could I have done to put more pressure on you? Because one of those things that you do when you're a player is you're trying to evaluate a spread of possibilities. You can do what's best for you, but that's not always what your opponent sees as worse for them. So being able to see those lines, getting a different perspective is always generally kind of useful.
Yeah, that's a good habit to have in tournaments or even in friendly play. When I play with friends, we are like 8 people and I win a lot. So they always ask me, what could have I done better? What mistake do I make? Something like that. So I always try to help them. And if they improve, I improve. I got better matchups, better. It's a win-win.
So how many golden ticket events does Chile tend to have? 1 or 2?
For example, the last year for the last Worlds, it was only 1 event.
Okay.
And this year, I think they were 4.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's 4 events. Good. Yeah. I went to 2.
Well, pretty good hit rate for you.
Yeah, I have only traveled to Santiago 3 times, and the 3 times I have won the tournament. So I'm 3-0.
You're the ringer from the edges of Chile, huh?
Yeah. But the level has grown up a lot. For example, from last year, I think, not to say bad things about the other players, but it wasn't that hard to win that tournament. But this year, the 2 tournaments I went, oof, yeah, a lot harder.
Yeah. I mean, generally things do get harder over time, especially as players catch up on the basics. We are in the new edition of Kill Team, which means that a lot of people are struggling to figure out the new tactics, new strategies for how to care about the game. Because a lot of the old metrics for older Kill Team players, basically have to take all of that stuff and just throw it out the window. Some of the stuff still matters, like the stats of Marines and, the dice rolling is all very similar, but why you want to approach certain parts of the map, those are all contextually very different. And now there's some new tools. Surveillance is obviously one of those big tools where Mandrakes can just Mandrakes, Commandos, any of these teams with fast moving infiltration operatives, now you do have the ability to score and just not interact with your opponent. Keep the game low scoring and run away from your opponent.
Yes.
Which is something in the last edition of Kill Team we always theorized was possible, but considering that 16 of your points was on the board that you have to go interact with, it was much harder to actually choose running away from your opponent as one of your major game plan metrics.
Yeah, it was super hard. Because also secondaries is max 6 points and primaries were 12, if I remember correctly. In the last edition?
Primaries were up to 16 for each turn, and then you had 6 on secondary. But because that was that was 3/4 of your overall points tally, you had to respect that you had to go touch the board, which meant that you could run away, but you were giving up a lot of resources on the back end. Yeah, so it was never really a realistic choice to choose not to engage on killing your opponent, choose not to play the primary op, and just play your attack ops. It was just never an option. Now, because each of the tracks is equal and you are picking a primary op, you can actually sculpt your game plan. So it's very cool to hear you talk about the Mandrakes and how you approach building out a strategy choice of staying away from your opponents and just, scoring 9 points and then picking your battles where they're the least advantageous for your opponent.
Exactly. It's a different plan, not always go shoot, go charge. It's a different approach that is now possible in this edition.
Yeah, I think, dwarf teams and 25mm base teams can also take some of these strategic decisions where you place more light barricades, you place the barbed wire, you lay out mines in ways where your opponent, if they're on 32mm bases, basically have to interact with you because you can't avoid the terrain at all. And that gives you more room to interact with your opponent and more space for you to find ways to score points. So I think those kinds of things are very cool. We saw a lot at the World Championships that, the raw power of 14 wounds with all the rules was good enough to do it at the end of the day. But theoretically, it looks like, GW is looking into those things. Hopefully some things get touched a little bit, they come down, and then the metagame opens up a lot, basically.
Yeah. We hope.
What does the player base play in Chile? Is it a lot of Marines still, or are people branched out already?
No, here it's like the majority of the players that I know, because I don't live in Santiago, but play like what they really like miniature-wise or lore-wise. And there is always the tryhards go for the meta, but normally the people play what they like.
Yeah, I think that's generally pretty universally true.
Yeah, it's a good thing. More important in a country where the scene is growing, is just starting now, and people is coming into war games, most of them, and you need to like your minis, you need to like the lore behind them, so you can like the game.
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to your future plans, are you planning to stick with Mandrakes, or are you eyeballing some other teams?
Now I'm playing Necrons and Sister of Battle, Novi Chase. And when I paint my hobbits, I'm going to play hobbits. But for now, Mandrakes in the shell. But next year, if I got a golden ticket and if Mandrakes are in a good spot, I'm going to probably take them.
Slowly becoming the Mandrakes player, huh?
Yeah.
Look, finding a team that you really vibe with is definitely one of the fun parts of the game, and it sounds like, Chile has got that in spades right now if everyone is still playing what they like over just raw stats. So I think
raw meta, yeah.
Sounds like a
Yeah, I
great
love
thing.
Mandrakes. I used to play the role games like Deathwatch, and I remember years ago, and we were a kill team squad of Deathwatch, and in a mission we play against Mandrakes, and in that moment I fell in love with Mandrakes.
As they like phase in and out of
My
existence.
master make them look so fucking good. So I love Mandrakes.
That's actually pretty sick. The whole loop, huh? A little bit of RPG experience in the background. You're playing like Dark Heresy, probably.
Yeah.
That's
So that's where the love came.
Hey man, if it works, it works. And Mandrakes are very cool right now. I always thought the models were sick, but there was definitely a period where, the Chooser flesh was really, really important in last edition against the Hordes. And it sounds like now, because we have new tools, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, which is very...
It's a good piece, but not the only piece.
To be the only piece anymore, which is great to hear. If you wanted to give any last shout outs to any like Chilean tournaments coming up, in the near future that you know of, we'd love to drop links in the show notes. So make sure to give those. But if you have anyone else you want to shout out while you're out here, before we head out.
To all my friends here in Valdivia, my city, we had a small group, but they play with me. They make me the player I am. So a big shout out to them. And also to the Chilean community in general, is growing a lot. So play a lot, keep playing, and hopefully next year more Chilean people can go to the Worlds. We got from 1 to 4 this year. I'm hoping next year maybe 7, like the Argentinians.
Yeah, that's a good aspirational goal. All right. Well, hopefully we see more of you next year, and we'll catch up with you anytime that there's big Mandrakes things going on.
Yeah.
We'll see. Hopefully we'll see you win a tournament on Mandrakes or something.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And as always, thank you, listeners, for listening until the end.